Hello and welcome to episode 376 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. What's going on?
Hello, Jason. Happy beginning of the real summer. Everyone seems to be out of the office. I feel like that's when summer really begins, when you get that notification.
I am here in my home office. I know you are home at your home office working, though I think all of Europe has melted as we're recording this.
Yes.
So if they want to take some time off, or maybe not, because maybe their office is air conditioned and they want to go to the office.
Well, even I think I saw John Walton was at Heathrow today, and it was 28 Celsius inside.
Oh, yes, melted in there. But to be fair, it is hot in the British Airways lounges in T5 in like the dead of winter. I don't think they have quite perfected the art of air conditioning there at Heathrow.
Or installed it. But yeah, it's the hottest day, I think, in the southern UK ever, if not close to.
For the month of June. No,
yeah.
It's just for the month of June.
Sorry, yes, the hottest June day ever.
I still can say I have been in the UK for the hottest day in recorded history, which was a couple of years ago in July, and hopefully they don't come anywhere near that. But I am home. I am here talking to you. I've got one eye on World Cup matches. We're currently watching Swiss International Airlines versus Air Canada, a big Star Alliance battle.
Yes, good old-fashioned Star Alliance medal.
Qatar is on another channel doing something. Yeah, so of course, you know, as AvGeeks, we have to equate every country and every match to airlines.
Well, you should get ready then, because we're putting together. So when we move to the knockout round, we'll be doing a fun little game where it will be flag carrier versus flag carrier in a livery contest for those teams that make it into the knockout round.
Oh, man, this is stuff I used to do back in like 2014 on Twitter, and it was always fun. And then I got too busy for stuff like this, but I wanted to do again. But now you're taking it on, which is even better because I can participate without having to put it together myself.
Now you get to participate and not have to do any of the work.
Yeah. What do you do for some countries that just straight up don't have an airline? Like Curacao, I guess there probably are.
Hope they don't make it. No, they have an airline. So Curacao is actually, they have an airline. I don't know if it's a flag carrier, but they do have an airline that put together a special livery.
Oh,
for the World Cup. So we've got a post on the blog that if you're into this sort of thing, and if you're listening to this podcast, I'd say it's better than 50-50. You're into this sort of thing. There is I actually think it's one of the better ones that Divvy Air put together on a Twin Otter registration, Papa Juliet, Delta Victor Delta. And it has the phrase Curacao on our backs, the world in our sight. And it's
okay, so somehow we didn't talk about this ahead of time, and I just named a random country in the World Cup in moving to the round of 32, and somehow you just knew all of that about Curacao.
We put together a piece there. So you can actually go and check out. So we put together a piece on airlines that did special liveries. We didn't plan on talking about this, but I think it's worth talking about because there are some really, really great looking special liveries for this year's World Cup. Air Algeria's A330neo, I think, is the best looking one of them all. It has a desert fox on the tail that just looks real sharp. You have some that were less, what's the word I'm looking for, artistic and engaging. And then you've got some that you know, go right down the middle. There's no shortage of team decals being applied this year, where you've got, 3 to 5 members of the national team on the tail or on the rear fuselage, but some good stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to take a look at that.
I mean, I am now partial. I am a super fan of Cabo Verde now because of the weird tie-in with their national airline with the Providence, Rhode Island route, their only transatlantic route, and Providence's only real international route on a very strange little airline with one whole airplane. But they too have a special livery for the World Cup, which I did not learn until right now. So I'm even more of a diehard Cabo Verde fan, and I love it.
This is the best thing about the World Cup, where a country you have a tangential relationship with at best becomes, the most important thing in the world to you for all of, 3 or 4 weeks.
I was about to say on their website, CaboVerdeAirlines.com, that, oh, look, they put together like a mock special livery for the World Cup. And to my defense, it is very much a Microsoft Paint mock-up on their website. But then on Jet Photos, I see it's an actual real livery. So they took the MS Paint mock-up and made it real. Hard to do considering that's their one 737. So any downtime for that aircraft is pretty impactful. But I want to go now. I hope they make it far. And now I want to go to Cape Verde.
I mean, that's the goal right there is, hey, discover us and then come visit. So consider their job well done. Good job, Cabo Verde Airlines marketing team.
Yeah, they're the official transportation provider of the Cape Verde national team because, of course, they are.
I mean,
this is good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Let's switch gears completely.
Talk about bad stuff.
And talk about not good stuff. Yeah. So yet again, in the United States National Airspace System, we are discussing a close call. And I feel like at this point, we need an official definition of close call because we're just talking about so often these days. And again, we've talked about, the fact that a lot of these are discovered because people have easy access to things like Flight Radar 24, Live ATC, et cetera, et cetera. But also, there's some things here that are happening that all feed into each other. And we're talking about an incident that happened Saturday, June 20th, where a Delta Airlines A319 was on approach to Boston and an American Airlines 737-800 was cleared for takeoff. Nothing happened. There was no incident. There was no accident. The Delta A319 conducted a go-around when it realized that the American flight was not going to be clear of the runway in time, circled around, landed without incident. But it does highlight the problem once again with intersecting runways and those few seconds of, the American flight being cleared for takeoff. They did not immediately start their takeoff roll. Delta was cleared for landing under the assumption that American would have departed. Since American...
I think it was actually the opposite. The controller had told Delta that departing traffic was waiting, I believe. And then at some point later down the road, that apparently became not the case, and the controller cleared American for takeoff. So the information given to Delta, if I'm reading the situation right, was not even correct. Or it may have been correct at the time it was issued.
Right.
But then that's a problem in and of itself.
And I think that's one of the things that this highlights is, we're talking about an arrival on one runway, a departure on another runway, a waiting departure on the arrival runway, because there was a JetBlue flight waiting to depart on the same runway that the Delta was arriving on. And so you end up with even a few seconds of delay one way or the other, you end up with a situation where you're relying on the pilots to spot something that might not be right ahead of time and then conduct a go around, or ATC chiming in and say, hey, go around. But this particular event was a pilot induced go around where Delta said, we don't like how this looks. American's still moving on the runway and we're going to go. And they ended up crossing over American about 300 to 350 feet above the aircraft.
Yeah, so we've seen much closer. Not that you ever want to get closer than this, but there's a bunch of questions. So the controller did, in the clearance to land to Delta 2351, did say traffic holds runway 27. That at some point changed for some reason because there were no other aircraft present at the time except the American flight, which was then pretty quickly issued a departure clearance, maybe about 30 seconds later. But then another problem occurred where the American crew just kind of sat there for 30 seconds. So even though the controller told Delta that the American flight was going to hold before departing, and then changed their mind and then issued the departure clearance for American. If American had departed in a timely manner, this would have been a non-issue. They would have been well clear of the runway for Delta, but for whatever reason, they hung around for 30 seconds, started to go, and the controller did not catch that American was hanging out for 30 seconds. But thankfully, the Delta pilots, one of the two Delta pilots, or maybe both, who knows, caught that and initiated a go-around on their own. But this is also kind of like the worst case scenario where, yes, the runways are intersecting, but they're at a very, very offset angle, having both aircraft kind of facing away from each other, I would say, where the Delta aircraft is flying northwest while the American airline is departing kind of mostly west, but also facing to the south. So the angles these aircraft are the pilots are going to be seeing each other is pretty extreme. I'm not even sure if it was possible for the American crew to see the Delta flight out there at the cockpit windows. And I'm sure that is something the NTSB is going to be looking at as well.
Yeah. Since the NTSB is looking into this, we should have a preliminary report about 30 days from now, so about the end of July. And it'll be interesting to see what they choose to focus on as far as this investigation is concerned and what they come up with in the initial report. Probably not very much, but the final report could be some very interesting reading.
Yeah, I do wonder if it's time that the FAA gets some sort of alert or technology in place that rings a bell or does some sort of alerting where if a flight has been given takeoff clearance and the departing crew doesn't move for 15 seconds, maybe something should go off and say, hey, you as an air traffic controller are always 6 steps ahead in your head. But what about if the things on the field don't actually keep up with you?
Right.
It's very difficult cognitively to think that many steps ahead and then something happens out there on the runways and it doesn't happen.
And not have someone follow directions.
Yeah. So it would probably behoove the FAA and the NTSB to have some sort of alerting because it's definitely possible. It's just software to say like, hey, you issued takeoff clearance to this flight 30 seconds ago and they're still not moving. You should probably take another look.
Give them a little poke with a stick or something.
Yeah. Throw a rock at the plane.
Don't suggest that. Let's head to DC, where the Air Current first reported on a Transportation Research Board meeting that took place on the 17th of June, where the U.S. Coast Guard has taken issue with the revisions to airspace around Washington, D.C. that happened following the January 2025 midair collision between a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter and a PSA CRJ-900. The Coast Guard says that the FAA didn't adequately consider the risks of helicopter-to-helicopter collisions and other factors when eliminating certain helicopter routes and making changes to those airspaces. So this is a really interesting one because the Coast Guard is saying, actually, I'm going to read the quote because I think that's what does it justice. This is from Commander Nate Rhodes, who leads the Coast Guard helicopter unit based at DCA. Quote, "It seems like a lot of what was being pushed was mitigating the risk between commercial airlines and helicopters, but it wasn't mitigating the overall risk. It was just transferring that risk elsewhere." So that's an interesting way of looking at it, because what the Coast Guard is saying is that the revisions to the airspace created unrealistic routes where they're asking helicopters to make 90-degree turns, and also the altitude structures that they've input on these revised routes don't necessarily take into regard the controlled flight into terrain concerns that some of these pilots have.
Yeah. I mean, clearly what the FAA put into place had to happen. There was, for years and years and years, these routings around DCA were problematic, and the obvious action immediately was to get rid of these conflicts. And yeah, it's not a perfect system. You move the problem elsewhere and the problem doesn't go away. It just changes the problem slightly. But there were some other quite interesting topics. I'm trying to find it in the TAC report here about basically like, hey, you've pushed everything further away from the airport. Now you have literally the entire rest of the country as your airspace. So maybe go figure that out.
That was the FAA saying that.
Yes.
Basically, to the Coast Guard. So the FAA in retort says, we don't have any data to support what you're saying, Coast Guard. We just don't have that data, which I guess is good in a way, that there have been no incidents that have resulted in the creation of data. However,
doesn't mean it's not happening. Yeah.
It also seems to me that it might be good to say, let's keep it that way. What are your concerns, and can we mitigate some of these through revised rulemakings, through further changes to the route system? Or is there something that we can do differently in your operations that allows you to conduct your missions, but also keeps everybody else safe?
Yeah. And some of the I mean, both sides here have valid points, of course. The Coast Guard saying you've pushed us farther away from the airport where it was easier to identify aircraft as opposed to everything else out there. They say because they're also low level, mixed with all the cultural lighting, that it's harder to spot farther away than an airliner over DCA. But I guess that's kind of been disproven at that point because we know what happened and we know where we are now. So I think that quote is kind of bunk from the Coast Guard here because it was proven to still be a problem to the point where a mid-air collision did occur. But yeah, this is tough. There's no perfect answer. You would hope we can rely more and more on technology to deconflict the airspace. But short of that, if these flights are still going to operate, they're going to have to operate elsewhere. And conflicts are always going to exist, I guess. I'm not sure what the answer is here.
Let's talk about that technology for a moment, because at the moment, lawmakers in Congress are still at odds over their competing bills to require ADSB in and other safety measures. The NTSB has called for ADSB in to be fitted to commercial aircraft, and others will see what Congress ends up mandating in what will need to be a compromise bill, unless the Senate can convince the House or the House can convince the Senate to go with theirs and theirs alone. But one of the sticking points seems to be something that doesn't really have much to do with safety at all, but rather with money. And that tracks as far as everything else goes. Right now, the big sticking point seems to be the ability of airports to use ADSB data to collect landing fees from private aircraft, which, of course, the private aircraft owners are against and the airports are for.
Why would they be against it? Just because they want to try to get away with not paying? Or what exactly is the argument there?
The argument is not that. The subtext of the argument, I think, is that.
Yeah.
But the argument on its face is that ADSB is a safety technology and should not be used for other purposes.
Sure. I mean, why not both?
You sound very convinced, Jason. I made a passionate defense of that argument, did I not?
When you start complaining about a bill like this that would be used for safety because we might have to actually pay our landing fees or whatever, or data might be more accurate and we might have to pay more. Okay, but you're just paying for what you're actually using and doing, right? It wouldn't necessarily mean you're paying more. It's just better tracked. I'm having a hard time following the line here.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the idea is that the argument that they're trying to make is it's a safety technology. It shouldn't be used for collecting landing fees. And the airports are arguing, well, we don't have the same technologies that this is mostly smaller airports making this argument where private, GA aircraft are operating. We don't have the same technologies that these large airports have to measure the same things. And so we need a way to ensure that we're accurately doing all of these things and collecting fees. So I think that AOPA and its arguments will win out in the final bill. It just remains to be seen how long it takes Congress to get in on this and come up with something that both houses can agree on.
Yep.
In other airspace news, the FAA and the DOT have selected airspace intelligence for two, what they say are complementary cutting-edge technologies that will improve how flights are scheduled and managed throughout the national airspace system. These are two AI-empowered tools. One is called Flow Management Data and Service, which will be the new technological backbone of the FAA's Air Traffic Control System Command Center. And that is in charge of balancing aircraft demand for airspace with airspace capacity, and provides all of the data that supports traffic management initiatives. And then there's the Strategic Management of Airspace Routes and Trajectories, or SMART, that is within the Flow Management Data and Services that uses data to prevent congestion and delays by coordinating schedules and trajectories before aircraft depart. So all very good things. We will be very, very closely watching how this is developed.
Yeah, to be clear, this isn't injecting AI or any sort of that nonsense into the actual air traffic controlling This is something that's used probably by every competent airline in the world at this point in scheduling wise.
One might argue machine learning.
Yes, there you go. To optimize flows, schedules, reducing delays. It seems to be good in theory. Whether or not the human capacity exists to actually act on these things rather than just slashing flights and saying, hey, we reduced delays because we increased more flights, like that's not great. But if they can actually improve traffic flow and actually increase airspace capacity, like the bullet points here on the FAA press release say it will, that's good. I am just hesitant to really buy into any of this because we've seen it all comes down at the end of the day to the human beings sitting in front of the scope. And that has been the number one most capacity constraining element in the entire national aviation system. And we have some news on that, don't we?
And we do have some news on that, Jason. Tell us all about New York slot controller.
Well, it's never getting better here. But the US FAA has extended slot relief at New York airports, which essentially means, hey, we're still not really staffed up to where we need to be. So you don't have to worry again through summer 2028 for LaGuardia and JFK and through this next coming summer at Newark. Don't worry about your slots or your runway timings. You don't have to use them all because typically it's use it or lose it. But we are still at a state where there are not enough air traffic controllers to actually operate a full schedule or all slots out of New York airports. The FAA says the New York TRACON is still only at 57% of target staffing levels, which is bad. That is quite bad. And it is not getting better, at least until they say in late 2027, which I don't quite buy because it seems like every time they say it will be better, it is not. And we still are not even at 60%. This doesn't even account for Newark, which has been moved to Philly, which this past weekend has had its first round of staffing delays. Actually, a couple airports throughout the country. I think SFO or maybe LAX had some staffing triggers as well. So it's all well and good to inject AI or machine learning into the planning and the optimization of the airspace and routing around thunderstorms. But still, again, at the end of the day, if there are only 57% of the air traffic controllers at New York TRACON, it doesn't matter what you optimize because you still have the same amount of employees to do the same amount of rerouting that they're not able to do today. So until that changes, I mean, I guess their new flow management data and services isn't coming online overnight. So maybe by the time that's ready, we'll have 62% of staff at New York TRACON. That would be nice.
Inching up there. Just inching up there slowly yet surely, hopefully.
So slowly. But at least we're seemingly in the clear on the Newark TRACON Philly move thing breaking down like every other day. I haven't heard of that happening in quite a while. So whatever they did, whatever copper wires they spliced together or whatever, seems to be holding for now, which is good.
Well, I mean, I guess we're in a take what we can get sort of situation here.
Yeah, we're back to the age of just like a cloud somewhere over Pennsylvania taking Newark offline for the whole day, which is, as intended.
Yeah, that's how it's designed.
Yes.
Let's head away from the US and over to Europe, where the European Union Aviation Safety Agency issued an emergency airworthiness directive on a little more than a dozen A380s this week. This follows the completion of inspections for previously mandated a look into wing spar cracking on A380s generally. Those inspections found 16 aircraft, 15 Emirates aircraft, and 1 Qantas aircraft, which had cracking that was serious enough for EASA to issue an EAD for these aircraft, breaking them down into 2 groups. Group 1, of which there are 5 aircraft, those aircraft cannot fly passengers until they receive the special inspection, a special detailed inspection that is being worked on in process with Airbus. Group 2, the larger group, can operate up to 25 flight cycles before those aircraft need to go in for inspection.
Yeah.
Most of the group 1. Go ahead, Jason.
A380 operators are no strangers to wing cracks on the A380 and inspection. So I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone who's followed the A380's life cycle. But this one, poor Emirates, seems to hit them a bit hard. Also one for Qantas.
Yeah, they've already got most of their aircraft into maintenance. There was one Group 1 aircraft that was being ferried. They were allowed a ferry flight with no passengers, non-ETOPS. They were ferrying it, I assume, to a location where the aircraft will be inspected thoroughly. It was headed to Asia, so possibly Hong Kong, I think, might be, or somewhere else. I'm not sure where else Emirates can find MRO space for an A380. But some of the other aircraft were already in for maintenance. So the one Qantas aircraft that was inspected here has been at Dresden since March, undergoing repainting, refit, new interiors, all that fun stuff. So I assume they'll be able to take care of whatever repairs need to be done there.
To toss that in, hey, I know you were putting a new coat of paint on, but would you mind inspecting the wings for cracks? That'd be great.
Just get in there and have a look. But only 16 aircraft. The interesting thing here is, and our resident numbers expert, Gamma Orloff, brought this up to me earlier today, the MSNs are all over the place.
That's weird.
I mean, it ranges from MSN 30 to MSN 234.
Oh, that's quite the range.
Yeah. 30, 42, 55, 56. And they're not, it's not like older ones are all Group 1 and younger ones are all Group 2. MSN 228 is in Group 1, 209 is in Group 1, but MSN 30 is in Group 2.
Huh. Very strange. I wonder how they put this list together then.
I think this is just the result of we inspected all of them, and these are the ones that look really bad.
Possibly. Sometimes it's not as complicated as you think it might be. It's just we looked at them and found it.
And found it. Let's stick with Airbus because Airbus says that it is once again saying that it's closing in on what it is calling simple stretch of the A220 into what will likely be the A220-500. So it sounds like the airframer is narrowing down to about an additional 5 rows of seats, putting it in about the 185 passenger mark. But what they also say is that the A220 sole engine supplier will continue to be the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan engine.
Much to the dismay of literally everyone, I think.
This came out during a Airbus Canada media briefing yesterday, the 23rd of June, up at Mirabel. And they are saying that they see no reason to move away. Improved performance from the engine is now being delivered by Pratt & Whitney. The new engines that are being delivered from the company are ostensibly free of the defects that were affecting previous engines. So hopefully they can get the most out of the geared turbofan engine as they move forward. It'll be interesting to see if that holds true.
Yeah, they're definitely doing a bit of damage control here. I'm reading an article from Runway Girl Network who is there at this event, and they say Airbus's head of the A220 program is quoted as saying, "We've come a long way with Pratt. I mean, today the relationship with Pratt is at a very good level." Adding, and this is outside the quote, adding that AOG nearing 0 and the engine now close to the benchmark. And again, quoting, "We have no reason, especially when we look at a simple stretch, to move away." I could think of one really good reason, and that would be reputation. Sure, the spare parts might be coming online and finally getting all the aircraft back in the air, but the reputational hit and levels of trust for Pratt & Whitney at airlines could not be any lower at this point. So yeah, the engines may work and things might finally, after years and years, be getting better. But if I were an airline, I don't know if I would trust Pratt & Whitney, or if I were, a bean counter of an airline that doesn't exist anymore because Pratt & Whitney put me out of business, I probably wouldn't trust them again. But there is good news, some good news out of all this. Mary Kirby on the Runway Girl Network says that Airbus says the A220 would remain 5 abreast seating if they do stretch the aircraft, which is great news because there was a lot of back and forth that if they stretch it, they might also squeeze an extra seat in every row. And well, that would just ruin the A220, wouldn't it?
It sure would. That is great news to hear that as far as passengers are concerned, a stretch is just a stretch.
It is what it says it is for now.
Let's stay in Canada for a moment and talk about Transport Canada beginning a review of its crew licensing processes. This comes after the announcement a few weeks ago.
Operation what? Come on.
What was it called, Jason?
I'm asking you to recall it. Operation, you're going to make me type the word operation in here. Nope, not Venezuela, not ground handling.
I'm going to keep going with the news, and you let me know when you figure it out.
Yeah, I'll find it, and we'll come back to it.
All right. So anyway, they are beginning a review of their licensing process a few weeks after charges against a former Air Canada pilot were announced because he used a fraudulent pilot's license during his career and while he was serving as a captain for Air Canada.
Project Icarus. Found it. There we go.
There you go. Too close to the sun.
Too close to the sun. How could we forget that?
Oh, boy. Shame on us. Jeffrey Wall was a captain for Air Canada who piloted more than 900 domestic and international flights between 2009 and 2025. He was also the former chair of the Air Canada Pilots Association Master Executive Council. He did not have an air transport pilot's license. He had a pilot's license, just not the one required to be piloting, among other things, a Boeing 777 for Air Canada. So Transport Canada says, we're going to look through this and make sure that everything's okay. To be clear, there has been no indication that there are other fake pilot licenses floating around, but they're going to look through and make sure. Air Canada, for its part, is cooperating with the investigation continuously, and they are being treated as the victim in this.
I mean, sure.
Transport Canada issued a civil aviation safety alert communicating the importance of, quote, determining the validity, authenticity, and currency of pilot licenses and associated credentials at all stages of employment and operations. So, yeah, that's good.
Whoops. Let's not let that happen again.
No.
And you know what? Other regulators out there, the US, the UK, EASA, whatever, hey, maybe you should do probably the same thing, because if someone could get away with it in Canada for an entire career, there's probably some others out there in other jurisdictions too.
Yeah, definitely something that all regulators might want to take a look at, but we'll see where that goes from there. Croatian investigators have released a preliminary report on the A220 veer-off, where the A220 veered off the left end of the runway as it approached V1.
And if you're having trouble remembering this incident, veering off is a light piece of terminology to describe what happened. It went off-roading and smashed through a bunch of signs. So that might help you recall this incident.
Fair enough. So the aircraft was near V1 when it approached the left side of the runway as it drifted, first gradually and then abruptly, veering off the runway.
First slowly and then all at once.
Exactly. Veering off the runway into the grass, striking runway edge lights and signage before it came to rest. Thankfully, no one on board was injured, but investigators are trying to determine what happened to make the aircraft veer to the left. They say that a previous Croatia Airlines A220 had successfully taken off from the same runway 4 minutes prior. There was a crosswind component. It was within limits. So they're looking at all angles to see what may have happened with this particular aircraft, and we'll hopefully have a final report in the near future.
Okay.
Neptune Aviation has taken delivery of its first A319 for water bomber conversion. I'm super excited about this.
Really? I had actually not heard about this. That's by far, I think, the most modern aircraft to be chopped to pieces and have a hole put in the bottom and douse it with water. Where did this airplane come from?
This particular airframe came from the Bro retirements out of Sweden. When they were operating for a period of time, some Airbus aircraft stopped operating them, retired the aircraft to, I think, Spain for storage for a little while, and then Neptune has acquired it. So this will actually be the first fly-by-wire aircraft converted into a water bomber. And I was looking at an article about this earlier today, and one of the things that popped out at me is that Neptune was saying it takes about 4 years to train a new recruit first officer to become a captain on one of these aircraft. And just the amount of impressive flying that they do and how they do it, I thought was just a really, really cool thing. And it's going to be very exciting to see their first fly-by-wire aircraft. They say it doesn't matter because once you turn the quote was, once you turn the autopilot off, it's just an airplane.
That's what I was going to mention. So first of all, this isn't coming into service until 2028 probably, but Airbuses in particular, fly-by-wire, are known for doing what they want to do. And if the pilot isn't putting controls that are unsafe or don't really make sense, the airplane says, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what I want to do because it's safer and the passengers will be comfier. So I assume for something as dramatic and dangerous as firebombing, they're going to be turning all that off and moving from normal law to alternate. Well, no, they're just
no.
How is that going to work? If you've ever seen water bombers before, like MD-11s or anything else, like it is precision operation.
They said they've tested it, and they said that, quote, once you turn off the autopilot, it's just an airplane.
Okay. I'm having trouble in my brain figuring how that works because all of the protections on an Airbus don't necessarily require autopilot to be on, but I feel like they probably know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I would assume that they've had a look at this. And they say that, they've been working on testing, ground testing and things like that, and proof of concept. So it's going to be super interesting to see. And just bizarre to see an A319 dropping water or fire retardant on a wildfire come the 2028 season.
Super, super interesting and strange. Huh. Okay. That's fun.
This might be fun, might not be fun, but it sure is interesting. Castlelake is really attempting to acquire EasyJet in whole, and they've been rebuffed thrisely thus far.
What's a Castlelake?
Castlelake.
What's a Castlelake? Who are they?
What's a Castlelake? Castlelake is a private equity and financing firm.
Oh.
They participated in the Air France KLM purchase of SAS. They were the financing partner there. So it was the Air France, KLM, Danish government, and then Castlelake. Castlelake also has a large aviation portfolio. So this is not coming out of left field. Castlelake has deep aviation experience.
Yes, this is what I wanted to clarify, that it's not like an Elliott Aviation coming in to gobble up and destroy Southwest. This is very different.
Yeah, this is very different. It's different in the sense that it would be a whole acquisition. This would not be an activist investor necessarily coming in and poking things around. This would be them taking control of the airline. The board has thus far rejected bids between £5.60 and £6.25 per share. Castlelake faces a deadline of Friday, the 26th, to make something happen. So they are attempting to go directly to the shareholders and get them to try and vote on an acquisition. So it'll be really interesting to see if this works out, if this turns into something where they're just trying to hold out for more money per share, or if the board really doesn't see a Castlelake takeover as in the best interests of EasyJet shareholders. But we'll keep an eye on that to see how things go.
Yes, we will.
Heading back to Canada, we have Porter doing something that surprises me and delights me. Jason, what did they do?
Lowered fees. Ian.
What?
Yeah, that doesn't happen ever, but in this case it did. So when the price of fuel went up a little bit and then doubled and quadrupled and then went through the roof, a lot of airlines reacted instinctively and said, we need more money, and put fees and random other surcharges in place. And Porter was one of those airlines that put a $40, quote, temporary fuel surcharge on reward redemptions and said, hey, we'll look into it when fuel stabilizes or goes down and maybe we'll revise it. And everyone goes, yeah, sure you will. Because if we've seen anything from our current state of inflation and tariffs and all that, once the price goes up, the price does not ever come back down. It stays that way forever because businesses are greedy and the world is terrible. But in this case, I don't know, Mr. Porter's friendly. And they actually lowered, they did not eliminate, they lowered the temporary fuel surcharge to $20 even, which is half. That's nice.
You know who would never do that?
Sir Turtle.
I was going to say Michael O'Leary.
Oh.
He would never do that.
No, but I will note that the price of jet fuel is come way, way down. It's still elevated above where it was before whatever it is the U.S. is doing with Iran at this point, but only a little bit. It has come down substantially. So it would be lovely to see other airlines follow suit, like Delta and American and United and JetBlue, who all increased their checked bag fees and all those other fees to lower those or eliminate them. But that's just not going to happen.
Those airlines also explicitly said, and I think they basically said, we believe these increases will be sticky.
Yes, they are very, very, very sticky. Kind of like, oil is sticky, I'm pretty sure. But hey, at least we get to see one airline doing the right thing.
There you go. I brought up Michael O'Leary because this week he signed on for another 6 years as the chief executive of the Ryanair Group. He will remain at Ryanair's helm through at least April 2032.
All right. Good for him, I guess. Ryanair is a fine outfit, making good amount of money, and Ryanair doing Ryanair things. So good for them.
Yeah, he's gonna stick around. So we'll have him to at least keep us with some podcast fodder every once in a while. For at least
maybe they'll even order some bigger Airbuses at some point, or actually ever see any of the 737 MAX 10 I'd ordered a long time ago. Only got like 300 on order, no big deal.
I think they could really.
Maybe that's why. That's probably the only reason he extended his contract, is just because he wants to see the MAX 10 delivered,
so that they can finally deliver the MAX 10s. Oh boy. Elsewhere in the world, we have a date for the end of Asiana Airlines.
Oh.
It's December 17th.
Yes. Good thing I'm flying Asiana at the very end of November. I'm an airline I've never flown, and I'm excited to fly once, and I guess never again. But who knows how long it'll take Korean to repaint all those aircraft. As we know, some other airlines take a very, 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 very long time to do that. But there was some controversy about Asiana canceling or removing award tickets if you booked with them using their Asiana miles on another airline after that date. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but this has been going on for half a decade at this point. So at least we now finally know we have a date where Asiana as an airline will cease to exist. And maybe we can finally put this all behind us.
I assume there will be some more complicating factors before we get to that point.
Hopefully those complicating factors happen after I fly them in late November.
There you go. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Jason, the more I read about Vietnam's Sun Phu Quoc Airways, the more I feel like we're developing an Asian Norwegian.
Ooh, that's not good. You don't ever want to be any region's Norwegian.
So they started up in November of 2025 as a full service leisure carrier.
That's like November 2025 was also like yesterday in airline life.
And they have since expanded the route network, taking on international destinations. They started with Taipei. They're going to Singapore, Seoul, and Hong Kong. And they are starting with A321s, but they also have a huge mess of 787s on order. They're going to also start operating some used A330-200s. They're going to try and expand to Central Asia, destinations in Russia.
Not just any A330-200s, former American Airlines A320-200s that have been chilling in the desert since COVID, where American probably regretfully retired them. So, that's a whole other story. Yeah. Finally good to see those getting a home. But you know what? I am going to retract your comparison of this airline to Norwegian and just directly compare it to another Vietnamese airline. Remember Bamboo? This is Bamboo. They already tried this in Vietnam. It failed spectacularly. They did the same exact thing with the same exact path where they had A330s they got leased from elsewhere, and then they took on really nice 787s, and then it didn't work. This is that again. You don't even have to go out of the country to compare it to something else.
Well, then, ouch.
Does Bamboo even exist anymore?
Bamboo exists in receivership and legal fashion. I think they had another judgment against them issued this week.
Yeah, it was
They're still around, though.
They're still around, a skeleton of its former self, but it's the same story where it was a small airline with foreign investment who had big ambitions. They got some NEOs, they ordered 10 787-9s, got a bunch delivered, and turns out expanding quickly is really expensive and really complicated. So good luck to this new Vietnamese entrant. Don't do the mistakes your former Vietnamese friends did. I don't know. This seems all sorts of weird, but I'm sure Boeing will be more than happy to take their deposit on those 787s.
Exactly. It's a promise of future success.
Sure.
Perhaps. JetBlue is changing its New York operations, closing its flight attendant base at Newark and its tech ops bases at Newark and LaGuardia, shifting some flying to Florida, where it actually makes money. Makes sense for an airline still trying to figure out exactly how it's going to carry on and continue to make money. But it's just sort of weird to see them closing up stuff in New York, given its New Yorkishness.
Yeah, well, remember, Newark is not New York, it's New Jersey. So there's a whole host of complications doing that. It makes sense to focus on JFK and trying to improve that operation, but at the same time, they have been whittling down their operation at LaGuardia. I'm pretty sure they lease out a good chunk of their slots. They don't have a huge operation like they used to at LaGuardia, so that kind of makes sense. Why would you need a base there? But yeah, it's disappointing to see New York's home airline never quite figuring out how to work in New York.
Well, Dubai's hometown airline is trying to figure out how to convince people to come back to Dubai. And Emirates has decided that it's going to offer really, really good travel insurance as part of the options as far as selling its tickets so that people feel comfortable and safe traveling through Dubai. A subsidiary of Zurich Insurance called Travel Guard and Emirates are teaming up to offer what is incredibly generous travel insurance, including cancellation protection, delayed baggage protection, unlimited medical expenses, and emergency evacuation from anywhere in the world.
Oh, okay. That's
but
all.
You also have to fly Emirates through Dubai. So there are trade-offs here.
Yeah, that's all good and whatever. But if DXB has to shut down again, or you misconnect, or you divert to DWC and you misconnect, and then your whole vacation is kind of ruined or set off by days, like, I bet that stuff's not going to be covered. Or if it is.
No, it is.
Even if it is, it does not get you time back. Insurance cannot.
That is also true.
Reinvent time. Unfortunately, they haven't invented that technology yet.
Maybe that could be a thing that we figure out, and then we can sell like time insurance.
We can do that time insurance. It's no, I don't think we have the technology yet. But one day. But yeah, insurance is good, but it doesn't get you your time back. So if you only have a week for your trip and suddenly 2 days is stuck misconnecting at DXB, well, that sucks. I do hope that very, very soon the Middle East carriers are able to get back to the juggernaut connecting operations they are. But that has not yet happened, and it's going to take just like this to get people to come back. Because right now, I unfortunately probably still would not feel comfortable booking Emirates or Etihad or Qatar or any of the other Middle Eastern airlines because things just are still too shaky for my taste.
Well, perhaps you could purchase a trio of 737 NGs and use those just as your fly wherever you want. What do you think about that?
Sure. Only if they came from Jet Airways.
Sold. How about...
Oh, no.
2 737-800s and a 737-900. I will caution you that one of them only has one engine.
That's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah, single engine takeoff is fine because it's only going to be me on board.
That one can be had for a base price of $530,000.
How does Jet Airways still exist as an entity? that has airplanes.
It exists as an asset disposal device because they still owe creditors over $1 billion.
It's been so long. How are we still talking about Jet Airways? That's outrageous.
The Indian legal system is nothing if not thorough.
For next week, I want you to do some research and find out, are there any aircraft still owned by Kingfisher and are in dispute somehow?
Without even looking, I can say yes.
The answer is yes. Don't have to look it up.
Yeah, don't have to look that. I've been trying to buy one of them for years. No, so yeah, a pair of 737-800s, one being offered for $7.4 million, one being offered for $9.4 million.
That seems high for basically a junker parts aircraft. But
I mean, they were delivered new to Jet Airways. They've got, I guess, low time engines. They've only been sitting around for a few years.
Yeah, they've got low time engines because they've been rotting in India for half a decade.
But they're still trying to pay off the bills. I can't believe they owe more than $1.5 billion.
That's crazy.
Which, yeah, very, very strange. But if you're looking for relatively inexpensive 737, one with only one engine, then, get in on the Jet Airways auction.
Sure. And if you're looking for a lightly, actually probably heavily used A320, the final Spirit A320, our final Spirit aircraft outright that was somewhere out doing Spirit things, has been ferried back to the U.S., Tucson, and then Marana out to the desert. This one, November 651 November Kilo, was in San Salvador since March, actually undergoing maintenance, since a lot of its maintenance happened there in San Salvador. And that's the end of that chapter. All of Spirit's aircraft have been moved from wherever they happen to be to the boneyard or onward to their next journey. End of a chapter.
Oh, and on that note, it's the end of this episode. This has been episode 376 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.